Planning for your impending death is not always the most cheerful of topics, especially knowing that your spouse has to carry on without you. While you may be facing this in a more immediate fashion, or you may just be considering, well, what happens after I pass away to my spouse and the finances? It's important to make sure that you have an idea of how your spouse will carry on, specifically as it relates to financial matters. In this video, what we want to do is go through some of the different action steps that you can take to make sure that your spouse is able to carry on after you're gone, and to do so in a way that they don't have to worry about adding any financial stress to their lives. Specifically, in this video, we're going to cover three things. The first is the 5 documents that you must make sure that you have as you're preparing for any impending death and that your spouse would need to have at your passing. The second is the information that you'll need and what you need to gather. The third is the contact list that your spouse will need to have to make sure that he or she will be able to reach out to professionals who can help them in this time of need. This video is going to cover some things, again, which are not the most cheerful of topics, but they are important. But just also understand this is not a comprehensive list. It's just a way in which you can get started and some things that you should begin to consider. If we haven't met yet, my name is Cieniewicz. I'm a CFP Professional at Hyperion Financial. The information that we cover in this video is meant to be educational in nature only and is not meant to be taken as any type of specific investment or financial planning advice. For some folks who have handled the finances themselves and have done so successfully, you may be thinking, well, I don't need to hire certain professionals in my life. And that very well may be the case. But we have often seen with times, sometimes their spouse may not be able to handle it. And certainly it's true in my household where one individual handles the finances, where if something happened to that individual, the surviving spouse would likely be left with a lot of questions and would likely be left with a lot of things unanswered. If you haven't done so yet, you probably want to have a conversation with your spouse to explain that at your passing, there are going to be things that need to be done financially. Simply put, the first thing that you should be looking to do is to get organized. The first step in getting organized is to make sure that you have the 5 documents that you'll need. The first document that you will need to gather, and specifically this is one that your surviving spouse will have, is the death certificate. Obviously, while you're still living, a death certificate will not be generated. But the reason why it's important to have a death certificate is it really is proof of your passing. For nearly any type of processing to take place, moving something from a joint or an individual to the surviving spouse's name only, the death certificate is the official way in which this can be provided as evidence. There are a number of different institutions or organizations that will require the death certificate. Just for example, there'll be financial institutions such as banks and investment firms. Any insurance companies will require this, in addition to government agencies, along with things such as probate court, any type of real estate or property transactions, or things such as credit card closure. To have the death certificate handy and the copies that you'll receive of these is important for your spouse to have, because having this document in place will allow the processing to take place in a much smoother way. However, it's also important to note that you should have a death certificate for more than just maybe what you would think are the official reasons. There are a couple of other services that would be requiring a death certificate if you were to close them out, which we don't often think about. The first one would be social media accounts. If you have a social media page in your individual name and your spouse wants to close it out, you do oftentimes need a death certificate to prove that this account can close. If you pass away unexpectedly and you haven't deleted a social media page, that company may require a death certificate. The other is a subscription service. So for example, a Netflix account or an Amazon Prime account or a Hulu account. Again, while this may not seem like the top priority, being able to close these accounts or move them to a spouse's name would often require a death certificate. Lastly, if you're looking to close an email account, some of these companies may require a death certificate that you have on file to, again, prove that your passing has taken place. By having a death certificate handy and multiple copies of them, you're then able to provide something in a timely fashion. Some companies may be able to accept a digital copy, while some actually need an original copy. Of note, the funeral home that you go to may be able to provide a number of copies, anywhere from 5 to 25. There can oftentimes be additional copies that you're able to request, which could require an additional fee. But just understand it's probably not a bad idea to plan ahead for maybe what some of the companies or the organizations that would require a death certificate are. And therefore, you can then have your spouse utilize these when the time comes. The second document that's worth having is a marriage certificate. The marriage certificate is an official form of documentation which would prove exactly that you and your spouse are married. You may need this form surprisingly for a number of different things. One that comes to mind is Social Security survivor benefits. So if a spouse is planning then to take over your Social Security benefit because maybe his benefit or her benefit wasn't as high as yours, the survivor benefit would allow that individual to collect on your benefit, which would be a higher benefit. So obviously it's worth taking. But in order to be able to utilize that benefit, the Social Security Administration would likely require that marriage certificate. It could also come in handy in the event of a pension continuation, where if you've chosen an option that gives the spouse a survival benefit, it could require the marriage certificate just to, again, prove that you have been married on a certain date. There are some other reasons why you may want to have it, and they include the following: ambiguous insurance claims. You also may have had jointly held property, which will solely go to the individual surviving spouse's name only. You could have employer health benefits or COBRA benefits, and even bank accounts. These types of accounts may require a marriage certificate. While not in all cases, it's good to have it just in case. And again, it's not a bad idea to have a digital copy of this in addition to the original. If applicable, you also may want to have a divorce decree handy. And the reason that is because you want to officially show that you have divorced from an ex-spouse and that you've remarried to your current spouse. There are some other forms of government-issued documentation which are always good to have as a secondary form. Those include some of your standards, such as a passport, a government-issued ID, driver's license, or a birth certificate. It's also not a bad idea to have your Social Security card. These types of documents, while they may be scattered around the house, it'd be good to have them in one location in the event that you or your spouse needs to have a form of backup of government identification. The third document that's worth having, and this is actually applicable while both spouses are still living, is a durable power of attorney. You may have heard of the term power of attorney before, but there are a couple different types of power of attorney. The first one is what's known as a durable power of attorney. This type of power of attorney is more so geared towards financial matters. In other words, if one spouse becomes incapacitated but is still living, he or she may not be able to make these decisions of sound mind, and that's when the durable power of attorney could take effect. The form specifically designates one person to act on behalf of another, or legally speaking, the agent or the attorney in fact is able to act on behalf of the principal. The agent or attorney in fact is able to make some of these decisions that otherwise would be decisions that would have to be made by the principal, but since he or she is incapacitated, the agent or attorney in fact is able to do so. You want to know that the person who is your attorney in fact has the best interest of you at heart when making this decision. Specifically, some of the things that they will be able to do on your behalf include making financial decisions, overseeing your full financial plan, making decisions on insurance policies, filing your tax returns, signing off on real estate or personal property transactions, and keeping record of your financial affairs. Keep in mind that you can also designate other tasks specifically within your document, and working with an attorney who's going to draft this up for you, you'll be able to work through any type of unique scenario that you may be facing. Understand, though, that this document is also limited. They can't do every single thing on your behalf. For example, they may not be able to change the specific last will and testament that you have created. But in a situation where a financial decision needs to be made and you're not able to make it, the attorney in fact can make it on your behalf. It's also worth noting if you have what's called a springing power of attorney or an immediate one. A springing power of attorney will take effect when a mental or physical incapacitation occurs, but not before then, as opposed to an immediate power of an attorney where that person, the agent or attorney in fact who you've designated, can immediately begin to make decisions on your behalf. Your specific situation will dictate which of the two you should have, and working with an attorney to help draft this will again be worth your time. The next thing worth having is a healthcare directive. And a healthcare directive is broken out usually into two different types of documentation. The first one is a healthcare power of attorney or a healthcare proxy. Similar to what we just discussed with the durable power of attorney, in the event that you're unable to make a decision because of a mental or a physical incapacitation, the healthcare power of attorney and the agent who you designate is then able to make some of the healthcare decisions on your behalf. Understand that these are two different documents, a durable power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney. The healthcare power of attorney is specifically geared towards health decisions on your behalf. Regardless, it's worth keeping both of these documents because in the event that you need to make some type of decision and you're incapacitated, that healthcare power of attorney will allow the agent to be able to act on your behalf and will do so in a way who's covering your best interests and what you would like to have happen. Conversely, another document that's included in a healthcare directive is what's known as a living will. The living will is documentation that you decide in terms of how you would like to move forward with potential ongoing or end-of-life care. The famous case that's brought to mind with a living will is from a couple decades ago now, known as the Terry Schiavo case. To summarize, it was a very sad and distressing case which played out on the national media. And really what took place was the husband of Terry Schiavo and the other family members all had conflicting ideas of what she would prefer to have in this state, whether to put it bluntly, end her life or to continue on life support. By having this document clearly outlined in a living will, you can avoid any type of conflicts that may take place between family members, and you're able to have your wishes best described in that legal document. The last document that you really should have is your last will and testament. While the will certainly won't answer everything in which you have in terms of your wishes, it is going to cover the vast majority of some of the things that you may want to have specified. Specifically, what it'll cover is it'll clarify your wishes and designate beneficiaries of specific possessions. For example, if you have a specific heirloom and it's very important that a son, a grandson, or any individual may have, you can specify it in the will that this specific possession is to go to that person. You'll also be able to appoint an executor to help manage the estate and ultimately execute the estate. It can also help provide alternate beneficiaries in the event where your designated beneficiary has predeceased you, and it can also designate a minor child who may be in your care as well. And it should help with some estate tax planning in which you can designate if there's a charitable organization who is to receive certain assets of yours. And lastly, not that it's a foolproof strategy, but it can help speed up any types of family disagreements. If it's clearly stated, you should be able to understand that the wishes are outlined on your behalf and done so in a way that is legally documented. For other individuals, you may have other forms of documentation needed. If you're a veteran, the Certificate of Release or Discharge from Active Duty, otherwise known as the DD-214 form, will also be able to help in the event that you have veterans benefits that you would have been eligible for. Regardless, having these documents in a safe, secure place, but also an accessible place for your spouse will really help speed up this process and take some of the worry that they may be experiencing at your passing. The next thing to cover is the actual financial information that you need and why. While what we first covered was more so the documentation that is necessary to have from a legal standpoint, it's also important to have some of the forms and documents which can help show your spouse this is where some of our assets are located. So for example, you may want to make sure that you have a recent statement or a copy of any types of financial accounts, including retirement accounts that you may have, insurance policies, whether that be life insurance policies or any types of auto and home policies handy, along with tax documents and digital accounts and subscriptions. For the financial accounts, they can include any of the following: bank accounts, such as checking, savings, money markets, and CDs, investment accounts, such as stock holdings or brokerage accounts, retirement accounts, IRAs, 401ks, 457 plans, pensions and annuity statements, credit cards, and any loans that you may have. Having a recent copy of this is a good idea, but potentially if you have origination paperwork for some of these as well, that can help speed up the process and help put your spouse in a situation where the information is readily accessible. Now, on these specific documents, you should have the following: an account number, an institution name and contact number. You should also know what the online login is, a beneficiary designation for certain accounts, and also the current account balance or policy value. If you have each of these things on a recent statement, again, a spouse can refer to this and have a better idea of what is in place if he or she doesn't already know. Also, not a bad idea to actually have a cover page of this. My team and I at Hyperion Financial help individuals with this, and I'm showing you right here what an example would look like. It does break down by beneficiary as well, how that will split out. But having this information in a cover page in addition to the supporting documentation can be very helpful. For the insurance policies that you want to have, it's pretty straightforward. It's the life insurance, any type of Medicare supplement plans or health insurance that you would have, disability insurance if you're still working, long-term care insurance, along with auto, homeowner, and umbrella insurance. It's also worth noting that some of these different policies can be held with different insurers. So making sure that you have a breakdown of where each of these policies is located can again help organize this information and make the process smoother. Assuming that you and your spouse have also been filing a tax return, you may be the one who has handled the tax return specifically, so you may be familiar with the documents that you receive prior to April 15th each year, but your spouse may not be aware of everything. Therefore, having a recent copy of your tax return with some of the forms that have gone along with it can help give your spouse a heads up to understand these are the accounts that either need to be closed out or could potentially continue if they were to roll over or move some of these accounts to their name. Many of these institutions will either secure to an online login or mail you some of the necessary tax forms that you need to file your taxes in a given year. If your spouse isn't aware of this, it can be a very overwhelming process to track down the account statements plus the necessary tax documentation. By having a recent tax return and going through with your spouse what each of these forms is, what they can expect to see, that can put them at much ease when it comes to filing your taxes the following tax year. Again, I'm going to show you something that we have done with our clients and how we help individuals understand which forms they can expect. But this information is important to have because if you're filing your final estate tax, or if your spouse will be moving forward with some of these documents and forms, it's good to know what forms they can expect to see and where they can expect to find them. One of the biggest hacks that I've found, and something that is in our digital age becoming more and more complex, is having a digital password manager. If you're like me, my spouse and I have a number of different accounts located in different places. Some are in her name, some are in my name, some are in both of our names, but we don't always know what the other password is. By having a secure, stored password manager, this can help speed up the process to be able to log in online. I struggle to think how difficult it would be without this type of password manager for a surviving spouse, especially one who's handled the finances primarily. I recommend that you and your spouse work on one that is user-friendly to you both. I don't necessarily have one that I would recommend because it really is best fit for you and your spouse. You want to find something that's accessible and works best for you. Lastly, there are a number of contacts that you should have who can really help with this process. The first thing that's good to gather is, even if it's a family friend who can help a surviving spouse, just to offer support, but also a chance for them to be able to refer to somebody who is trustworthy and who you know can work together with your surviving spouse at your passing. From there are 6 different professionals that I recommend that you consider having as well. The first is the funeral home director. And again, pretty straightforward, but this funeral home director should be able to assist in things such as the burial services. They can obtain the death certificates. They will also assist potentially with some of the government issued assistance that you may need to require, such as Social Security forms or other government benefits that you may need to take advantage of. The other one to have nearby is an estate attorney. This person will be able to help with the probate process if necessary, and they'll also be able to ensure that the will is properly executed. In addition to that, they will be the ones helping to transfer some of the ownership of possessions. It's also a good idea, if you haven't already, to find somebody, either a financial planner or CFP professional, who can help reviewing the overall financial plan while you're both still living and at your passing. They'll also be able to adjust some of the budget and the investment strategies and be able to help on beneficiary designation for some of these accounts. They'll also be able to help oversee the overall plan and be able to coordinate with some of the other professionals in your life. The next is an accountant or a CPA. Specifically, this person will help file the taxes for the current year and also advise on future tax changes, which there are a number of future tax changes that could take place for a person who is a qualifying widow or widower to eventually a single filer. The other thing that they'll be able to help with is inheritance tax issues and be able to walk you through what to expect. The other person's information you want to keep handy is a bank account representative. They'll be able to transfer joint accounts to a surviving spouse's name. They'll be able to close accounts from a deceased individual's name, and they'll also be able to redirect automatic payments and update beneficiaries to make sure that nothing is missed. Lastly, an insurance agent is also worth keeping close because they'll be able to update policies as needed and review if any changes need to take place with your insurance policies and assist with any life insurance proceeds. This list is not all encompassing, but it is a great way to get started to make sure that you have the contact information with the professionals that you've put your trust in. As someone who has helped surviving spouses in both my family and in my professional setting, I can tell you firsthand, it is not a fun process to go through. It is incredibly difficult. It's emotionally draining, but you can make it a little bit easier and take away some of the stress if you're able to work around some of these things by getting organized on the front end. Bottom line is this: one of the greatest gifts that you can leave to a surviving spouse is to have them not worry about the finances, especially one who isn't financially savvy or has handled the finances to this point. By getting organized and being able to at least take care of some of these steps, you've gotten a head start to make sure that your spouse is able to grieve properly and not have to worry about the added stress. I'm sure you've heard stories, whether that be from celebrities or whether it be from friends or family, who have gone through a process of difficulty because the financial matters weren't handled prior to the passing of a loved one. By being able to gather all this information ahead of time, you can put your spouse in a position where you're no longer worrying about, will they be able to carry on without me? If you haven't done so yet, check out our website, HyperionFP.com. We help folks get organized both while they're enjoying their retirement, but also for end-of-life care. We also have a number of other great videos in which we cover things such as this, in addition to some things such as retirement planning and the different things that they need to be aware of. Feel free to subscribe for more great content, and be sure to reach out if you have any specific questions.